what they're talking about. On the other hand, NOAA does too, and NOAA has been successful. They've been successful from Alaska to Florida in allocating assigned limits to various fishing entities because we are losing our fishing stock. I think there's only 15 seconds, but if you'll only take 5 seconds.
Well, when you get from Alaska to Florida, don't you have to pass Massachusetts, New Jersey, and North Carolina? Because the three of us think it's a terrible idea.
Well, I said from Alaska to Florida, reclaiming my time. The point is, NOAA's objective is to sustain the fish supply so that these fishermen will continue to have jobs, not just now, but in the future and for their children and grandchildren. That's NOAA's objective. That's why I think we should reject the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Time of the gentleman has expired. All time has expired. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from North Carolina. As many as are in favor will signify by saying aye. Those opposed will say no. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from North Carolina.
I would like to request a recorded vote.
A recorded vote is requested pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18. Further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from North Carolina will be postponed. Missouri. Purpose of the gentleman from Missouri rise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at desk number 47.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 47, printed in the Congressional Record, offered by Mr. Lukemeyer of Missouri.
Pursuant to the order of the House of February 18, 2011, the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Lukemeyer, and a member opposed will each control 3 minutes. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of my amendment, which would eliminate funding for the Missouri River Authorized Purposes Study, also known as Mr. RAPS. This $25 million study was originally earmarked under the guise of a review of the 1944 Flood Control Act and relevant court rulings to determine if current authorized project purposes are contemporary. Mr. RAPS comes on the heels of another comprehensive $35 million, 17-year study completed in 2004 that showed that the current authorized purposes are appropriate and do not need to be altered. For river communities, 2 issues are as important as water supply, power, and navigation. This study puts in jeopardy the flow of the lower Missouri and Mississippi rivers, which would have devastating consequences for navigation and transportation along those rivers and barriers to agriculture, waterways operations, and every product that depends on the Missouri and Mississippi River to get to market. Mr. Rapps is duplicative and wasteful in taxpayer dollars. We already spent $35 million to examine the Missouri River Master Manual. After 17 years, hundreds of public meetings, and countless lawsuits, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers concluded that the current uses of the river are appropriate. It is careless and irresponsible to conduct another multi-year, multi-million-dollar study at taxpayer expenses, particularly in the dire state of our nation's economy. Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from Missouri, Ms. Hartzler.
Gentlelady from Missouri is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wholeheartedly support this amendment, which saves taxpayers from funding a duplicate study which is unnecessary, wasteful, and ill-advised. The Corps of Engineers just completed a 15-year study at a cost of $35 million. The Missouri River Master Water Control Manual has been published, and businesses, municipalities, and utilities have been planning accordingly. There is no need to restudy the issue of the Missouri River again at an additional cost of $25 million. Farmers, businesses, and cities in Missouri's 4th Congressional District support this amendment, and I urge my colleagues to support this common-sense proposal. Mr. Chairman, I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back his time.
I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves his time. Gentleman from Arizona.
I rise in opposition to the amendment.
Gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 3 minutes in opposition. Gentleman's recognized.
To my colleague from Missouri, I would tell him that the objective of this amendment has pretty much been accomplished. And that happens, the last funding that occurred for this study was in, I think, 2009, which was an earmark. So now that earmarks have been eliminated in the CR and eliminated for the future, you would not have that funding as a possibility for this study. Also, the administration has not put any money in its budget, so therefore there's no money in the budget. So for all practical purposes, the funding for this study is not going to continue. So therefore, it's very unlikely that the funding level provided in the bill will receive anything more than the amount to close the study. And I would tell my friend that the reason I oppose it is that this language, I think, may be unnecessary because it may impact the orderly termination of the study. And that's why I rise in opposition, because I believe since this study, at least in my opinion, has been terminated, that we at least go through an orderly order with the few funding that's available, so we can have an orderly termination. And I'll reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from Missouri.
With all due respect to the gentleman, I would appreciate some certainty, and I think that's what the purpose of this amendment is all about. You indicate that it's still in existence, it's still being funded. We want it out. We don't want it to fund it any longer. The purpose of it is duplicative. The study's been done before, and I think it's time that we call a stop to it. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from Arizona.
Well, I think I heard the gentleman tell me that the last time the study occurred was in 1944. And because earmarks are no longer the practice and the administration is not providing any funding, it's my belief, in my opinion, that this study will not go further, and the few dollars that may be left from the former earmark will be used to terminate the study in an orderly fashion, and I reserve my time.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from Missouri.
I'm ready to close when the gentleman is ready to close.
The gentleman from Arizona has the right to close.
With that, Mr. Chairman, the last study was completed in 2004 at a cost of $35 million. Took 17 years, and now we want to do it again. I don't believe it's appropriate for our taxpayer dollars to be used in this manner. And with that, I ask for the support of the body. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Arizona.
You done? No.
The gentleman from Arizona has 1 minute remaining.
Again, I would ask my colleagues to vote no on this amendment, because the objective of the amendment has pretty much been met. There's no funding available to continue it. The few dollars that remain will only be used to terminate the study in an orderly manner. That's the proper way of doing it, and I would ask my colleagues to vote no on the amendment, and I yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back his time. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Missouri. As many as are in favor will signify by saying aye. Those opposed will say no. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I request a recorded vote.
Recorded vote is requested pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18. Further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Missouri will be postponed. Does the gentleman from Missouri rise?
Amendment at the desk is number 149.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 149, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Luetkemeyer of Missouri.
Pursuant to the order of the House of February 18, 2011, the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Luetkemeyer, and a member opposed will each control 3 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of my amendment, which would prohibit the U.S. contributions to the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, an entity that is fraught with waste and engaged in dubious science. The IPCC advises governments around the world on climate change, and supporters of cap-and-trade legislation have used the questionable science, the findings of the IPCC, as reasons to support onerous legislation. Criticism of this science intensified over the last 2 years when emails publicly released from a university in England showed that leading global scientists intentionally manipulated climate data, suppressed legitimate arguments in peer-reviewed journals, and researchers were asked to delete and destroy emails so that a small number of climate alarmists could continue to advance their environmental agenda. Since then, more than 700 acclaimed international scientists have challenged the claims made by the IPCC in this comprehensive, independent, 740-page report. These 700 dissenting scientists represent some of the most respected scientific institutions at home and around the world, including the U.S. Departments of Energy and Defense, the U.S. Air Force and Navy, NASA, and even the Environmental Protection Agency. For example, famed Princeton University physicist Dr. Robert Austin, who has published 170 scientific papers and was elected a member of the U.S. National Academy of Sciences. Dr. Austin told the Senate committee that, unfortunately, climate has become a political science. It is tragic that some perhaps well-meaning but politically motivated scientists who should know better have whipped up a global frenzy about a phenomenon which is statistically questionable at best. Mr. Chairman, if the families in my district have been able to tighten their belts, then surely the federal government can do the same and stop funding an organization that is fraught with waste and abuse. My amendment simply says that no funds in this bill could go toward the IPCC. This would save taxpayers millions of dollars this year and millions of dollars in years to come. In fact, the President has requested an additional $13 million for the IPC in his fiscal year 12 budget request. Our constituents should not have to continue to foot the bill for an organization to keep producing corrupt findings that were used as justification to impose a massive new tax on every American. They deserve better. With that, Mr. Chairman, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
I rise to take the time in opposition to this amendment.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 3 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, my colleagues, this amendment would eliminate funding to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC. The U.S. contributes only $2.3 million to the IPCC, and our $2.3 million contribution leverages a global science assessment institution with global outreach and global technical input, a process we could not carry out alone and one that could come to a halt without U.S. support. Their work on climate change is unparalleled. In its 4 assessment reports to date, they've brought together thousands of scientists around the world in disciplines ranging from atmospheric science to forest ecology to economics to provide objective and policy-neutral information. The panel has attracted hundreds of the best U.S. scientists. In fact, a majority of the research that's reviewed is undertaken in U.S. institutions. The IPCC's work has been lauded by the U.S. Academy of Sciences and by the Inter-Academy Council, a body comprised of the national academies of the world. In fact, that organization won in 2007 the Nobel Prize for its assessment work. This institution is a nonpartisan and technically extraordinarily sound organization. The Republican majority has already voted to prevent EPA from using funds to regulate greenhouse gases. Now we're being asked to defund the work of international scientists to learn about the threat. Now, the assumption, I assume, is that there is no threat, and therefore let's not study it. I think that is not a wise assumption. This is a very short-sighted proposal to cut these funds. It's like putting our heads in the sand, denying the science, and then stopping the scientists from working because they might come to a different conclusion than the Republican majority's ideology in believing that there's no such problem and therefore we don't need to know about it or do anything about it. If we're not going to do anything here at home, let's at least work internationally to understand the threat and to deal with other countries to combat it. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Missouri.
I'm going to reserve the balance.
The gentleman reserves his time. Gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The gentleman last year or two that's been the International Panel on here has been funded at the rate of about $12.5 million per year. The President has it in his FY12 budget at $13 million a year. This group has been in the headlines for their activities with regards to how they are trying to tinker with the data that they put out. It's why would we want to fund a group of folks who are nefarious and give us incorrect information? It's beyond me. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, I don't understand how the gentleman from Missouri could say that these are a nefarious group of people. After all, these are people who are scientists who've won the award from the Nobel Prize for their scientific activities. I used to think that people from Missouri were the show-me state. Now I gather what this gentleman from Missouri is suggesting is, I don't want to know about it. And I don't think that's what the position ought to be of the United States Congress. Let's learn the facts and then decide what to do about it, but not stop trying to know what the science is behind the global threats.
Time of the gentleman has expired. All time has expired. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Missouri. As many as are in favor will signify by saying aye. Those opposed will say no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Chairman,
Gentleman from California.
I ask for a recorded vote.
A recorded vote is requested pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18. Further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Missouri will be postponed. What purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to offer amendment number 569.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 569, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Issa of California.
Pursuant to the order of the House of February 18, 2011, the gentleman from California, Mr. Issa, and a member opposed will each control 3 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. President Obama announced a pay freeze. Within his executive order, he froze all pay he could freeze. The one he could not freeze were step increases. This simple amendment adds to President Obama's 2-year freeze and the 7-month freeze for the period that he was unable to cover of step increases. Step increases are simply pay increases because you're on the job, period. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California reserves his time. The gentleman from Virginia.
Mr. Chairman, I rise to claim time in opposition to this.
The gentleman is recognized for 3 minutes.
We all agree that we need to be financially responsible with regard to the federal budget. But this continuing resolution already substantially reduces funds for every single agency of the government. A freeze in civilian pay for federal employees is already in effect for 2 years. It prevents inflationary and locality pay increases for the entire federal workforce, including civilian employees of the Defense Department. Although uniformed employees can get raises, but preventing merit and periodic pay increases is another matter. Perhaps the authorizing statute should be changed, but the reality is that requires legislation. This doesn't address that. What this does is say if you're a political appointee, you can get an increase, but not if you're a civil service employee. Mr. Chairman, a little over a majority of the federal workforce is eligible for retirement over the next 5 years. We're going to make their lives far more difficult with the restraints we're putting in this bill, and then we're going to say they're not going to be able to get compensated. We're going to lose our best and brightest people in the federal government, and as a result, the American people are going to lose. Now, with that, let me reserve my time because I want to yield some to the distinguished gentleman, Mr. Wolf.
The gentleman from Virginia reserves his time. The gentleman from California.
I would continue to reserve.
The gentleman from California reserves his time. The gentleman has 1.5 minutes remaining.
I'll yield a minute to Mr. Wolf.
Gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Wolf, is recognized for 1 minute.
I rise in opposition to this amendment. Timothy McCarthy, who was the Secret Service agent that stopped a bullet that would have killed one of the greatest presidents we've ever had, Ronald Reagan, would have deserved a step increase. Dr. Collins, who has mapped the human genome system to be able to deal with pancreatic cancer, breast cancer, who could go outside and get a job anywhere, would deserve a step increase. The FBI agent that's tracking down and working to find al-Qaeda and terrorism and radicalization would deserve a step increase. And lastly, some members of this Congress have employees who have done such a good job, many of them who are perhaps on the Appropriations Committee, would deserve a step increase. If you vote for this, you can never give any of your employees a step increase for the vestige this year. This is a bad amendment. I urge its defeat and yield back the bill.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from California.
I recognize myself what time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized for as much time as he may consume.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to clear up some facts because I believe in the effort to try to make a point, people have failed to be quite as accurate as they should. First of all, political appointees, the President has already frozen their pay. Second of all, awards, raises, and bonuses are not limited by this freeze. The fact is, if somebody is meritorious of a raise, award, or bonus, they will still be able to get it. When they say that budgets have been cut, if budgets have been cut, not having this $500 million in the first year and another $500 million in the second year will in fact allow those budgets to go further. And when they say that these are effectively meritorious, from the Office of Management Budget of the Obama administration, we received the figure. It is 99.94% of all eligible federal employees, meaning only 6 out of every 10,000 employees fail to get this automatic increase. This saves over $500 million in 7 months, over $700 million the next year. It is consistent with President Obama's freeze, and the freeze is exactly what we're trying to do. Give the President what he said in the spirit in which he said it. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from Virginia.
I understand that we would close the
gentleman from Virginia has the right to close.
So with 30 seconds, I think I should let the gentleman from California conclude his remarks.
So the gentleman is prepared to close?
I am prepared to close.
Can I inquire as to how much time I have left?
The gentleman has 1 minute and 15 seconds remaining.
Thank you. I won't use it all. It's been a long night, and the American people hopefully are still watching. And as they watch what we are doing here, and they see people coming and crying for the federal worker, I hope what they realize is the federal worker is not losing a day's pay. We are not eliminating federal workers, and federal workers will be able to get awards, bonuses, any meritorious increase or promotion. We are simply saying that for 99.94% of all federal workers, non-uniform, to simply get longevity increases after the President has ordered a pay freeze is disingenuous to the process. And we want to be genuine to the President's executive order and genuine to a process here. The House of Representatives rolled back our funding by 5%, and that was a good start. But if we don't do this, we're not even genuinely freezing the pay of our own federal workforce. I strongly urge support for this amendment, keeping the promise of the President and the promise of to the American people. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Virginia.
You have 15 seconds to the
I rise in strong support of the position of our committee in opposition to this amendment. And I want to associate myself with the remarks of Mr. Moran and Mr. Wolf.
Gentleman from Virginia.
Mr. Chairman, we're the world's superpower, and much of the responsibility for maintaining the status of being that superpower falls on the shoulders of our federal employees. Already, they get about a third less than what they would be getting in the private sector for the same responsibilities. But we desperately need the best and the brightest from all over this country to serve the American people. If we punish them by limiting their salaries, by making them scapegoats,
time of the gentleman has expired.
To the American people. Let's not do this.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California. As many as are in favor will signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed will say no. No. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The noes have it.
Mr. Chairman, on that I ask for a recorded vote.
Recorded vote is requested pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18. Further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California will be postponed. This is the gentleman from Oklahoma rise.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk, number 94.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 94, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Sullivan of Oklahoma.
Pursuant to the order of the House of February 18, 2011, the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Sullivan, and a member opposed will each control 3 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment would simply delay the implementation of the EPA's E15 waivers for the remainder of the fiscal year, which would allow Congress time to address safety concerns related to the higher blend of ethanol gasoline before the EPA puts it in our general fuel supply. Despite alarming consumer, environmental, and economic concerns, the Environmental Protection Agency has approved a 50% increase in the amount of corn-based ethanol allowed in gasoline used by cars and light trucks manufactured in 2001 model year and newer. This is simply another attempt by the EPA to engineer ethanol mandates to drive ethanol subsidies forward. And yes, this is a mandate. The EPA has mandated that we use 36 billion gallons of renewable fuels like ethanol annually in our motor engines by 2022, and through incremental steps and backhanded attempts just like this, the EPA is mandating. The EPA's move from E10 to E15 fuel over the next several months is in effect a backhanded 50% increase in the corn ethanol mandate, putting consumers, engine makers, and gasoline retailers at risk. Gasoline station owners are terrified of how they will comply with this E15 mandate because not all of the existing infrastructure is certified for the fuel. Under the EPA waiver, they will have no liability protections. Quick Trip, a major gasoline retailer across the Midwest, which is headquartered in my hometown of Tulsa, Oklahoma, offers an unconditional guarantee on every drop of gasoline they sell. Because of the lack of liability protections, they will be left on the hook if someone puts the wrong blend of gas in the wrong kind of car. That will open up a litigation nightmare. Why do we want to further mandate a fuel consumers don't want and retailers are afraid to sell? This is a major consumer safety issue that could adversely impact up to 60% of the cars on the road today. It is also important to point out the environmental impacts of this as well. The higher a fuel blend like E15, the higher the toxic air pollutant emissions. Since ethanol contains just 66% of the energy that gasoline does, E15 will lead to an actual drop in gasoline mileage. The EPA has even said you get 5% less fuel economy with E15 than clear gasoline. The EPA has completely ignored calls from lawmakers, industry, environmental, and consumer groups to address important safety issues raised by the 50% increase in the ethanol mandate waivers. Putting the brakes on E15 is the right thing to do for the people that we represent. I ask my colleagues to join me in passing this amendment, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Virginia.
Mr. Chairman, I rise to claim the time in opposition.
The gentleman is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But, Mr. Chairman, at this point, I would yield to a very thoughtful, informed expert on this issue, Mr. Latham.
I thank the gentleman very much for yielding, and I understand that the gentleman from Oklahoma represents oil, and the reason that he's doing this. But current government regulations restrict the ethanol blend to 10% by volume. And meanwhile, ethanol producers, they've hit the 10% cap and producing more ethanol that can currently be used under the restrictions that are in place. And I have to correct the gentleman when he said EPA mandates this. It's Congress, us, that mandated the 36 billion gallons of renewable fuel by 2022. And it's essential with that mandate from Congress, this is not EPA, that we increase E10 to E15 to continue our investment in renewable fuel for the economy. Raising the limit will accelerate the use of renewable fuels made in the U.S. We're not importing this oil, Mr. Chairman. We're lessening our dependence on foreign sources of oil and encouraging continued investment in research in advanced biofuels like cellulosic ethanol also. As importantly, raising the limit will grow our economy here in the U.S., create about 136,000 jobs in the United States. This is oil that we're not importing from overseas and spending billions and billions of dollars with our military to defend the oil coming into this country. These are good-paying jobs. They're very excellent as far as jobs in rural America that cannot be outsourced overseas. Science supports E15. It's the most tested fuel in history, with the EPA and the Department of Energy stating that higher ethanol blend does not harm engine durability nor emissions equipment for vehicles aged 2001 and newer, which represents more than 70% of the vehicles on the road today in the United States. It's clear that science supports the decision. There's no doubt that the E15 blend limit is good for our economy, it's good for our energy independence, and everybody talks about all of the above. This is part of all of the above of energy independence for the United States. It's good for continuing investment in renewable fuels energy and for the rural parts of this country that need an awful lot of help these days. I certainly oppose this amendment, and I would yield back to the gentleman to reserve.
Mr. Chairman, how much time do we have left?
The gentleman from Oklahoma's time has expired, and the gentleman from Virginia has 15 seconds remaining.
I yield the remaining time to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 15 seconds.
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank my colleague from Virginia for 15 seconds. I want to associate myself with the remarks of my colleague and member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Mr. Sullivan. I think we need to think how we're doing this with ethanol. It costs more. I don't want to import oil either. That's why we need to produce it in our own country, Mr. Speaker, and I'll yield back my time.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Oklahoma. As many as are in favor will signify by saying aye. Those opposed will say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have vote. A recorded vote is requested pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18. Further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Oklahoma will be postponed. What purpose does the gentleman from West Virginia rise? What purpose does the gentleman from West Virginia rise?
I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment. Which amendment is it?
Number 216.
Is that
McKinley.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 216, printed in the Congressional Record, offered by Mr. McKinley of West Virginia.
Pursuant to the order of the House of February 18, 2011, the gentleman from West Virginia, Mr. McKinley, and a member opposed will each control 3 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from West Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We all should be concerned about the recent actions by the EPA and how it continues to destroy jobs by exceeding its statutory authority as envisioned by Congress. In West Virginia, our state's economy is highly dependent upon the coal and natural gas industries. On January 13, 2011, the EPA took an unprecedented action by retroactively revoking a lawfully issued 4-year-old permit for the Spruce No. 1 surface mine in Logan County, West Virginia. This permit had been issued by the Secretary of the Army under the Clean Water Act and was approved by the Corps of Engineers in January 2007. For nearly a decade, the Corps of Engineers worked with the EPA to rigorously review the Spruce Mine project before it was approved. The permit was issued after this extensive environmental review, which included a 1,600-page environmental impact statement in which the EPA fully participated and agreed to all the terms and the conditions included in the authorized permit. Just to be clear, the EPA had every opportunity to address any concerns and work together with the Corps of Engineers prior to the permit being issued. By giving the EPA the funds to retroactively veto this permit, a dangerous precedent is being set for future job-producing ventures by businesses and industries throughout this country. These actions by the EPA continue to justify why so many Americans worry about the EPA's relentless war on coal. If the EPA can be allowed to retroactively revoke a permit in West Virginia, they can continue this onslaught wherever water permits exist throughout America. Any entity discharging water is vulnerable to having their permits pulled and will put at risk city sewage treatment plants, farms, mines, steel mills, and chemical plants. EPA's veto at Spruce Mine caused a loss of 253 mining jobs and 298 indirect jobs in West Virginia. In addition, it prevented the investment of nearly $250 million. The EPA's action has had a chilling effect on many types of companies, all of which rely on the uncertainty of the permitting process in order to make crucial business planning decisions. It's virtually impossible for companies to take the necessary steps to obtain financing and create jobs if they must endure the threat of retroactive revocation of the very permits that allow them to do business. Today, this injustice happened at Spruce Mine in West Virginia. Tomorrow, the EPA could very well pull an existing water permit at a steel mill in Indiana, a chemical plant in Texas, a sewage plant in Iowa.
Time of the gentleman has expired.
Thank you.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from Virginia.
Mr. Chairman, I rise to claim time in opposition.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 3 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, the gentleman from West Virginia's amendment tries to prohibit EPA from carrying out Section 404C of the Clean Water Act. It's one more effort to deregulate all aspects of mountaintop mining. Section 404C authorizes EPA, under especially serious circumstances, to pull back permits for dredging and filling material if they would have a substantially adverse effect upon the quality of water, wildlife, and fishery areas. EPA has only used this 404C authority 13 times in the 39 years of the Clean Water Act. But this amendment and its backers don't want EPA using that authority to prevent the coal industry from polluting the contiguous waters to their mountaintop mining. But we know that mountaintop surface mining removes entire mountaintops so that they can get to the coal underneath, but then in the process invariably deposits toxic mining waste in the nearby streams, and then that gets into the full water supply. It costs substantial sums of money to subsequently clean it, and it can really be not only devastating to the environment, but devastating to local economies. Only in the most egregious instances has EPA used this authority. They should have the right to pull permits when companies seriously harm the environment. That's their responsibility. It's understandable that mining companies don't want any restriction on their mining, but it's not excusable for this Congress to prevent the EPA from carrying out its lawful responsibilities and not to heed the long-term health impacts of the American people and of the quality of the water in these regions. So I urge the defeat of this amendment, Mr. Chairman. Now I'll reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from West Virginia's time has expired, so the only time remaining is your time.
And how much time might that be, Mr. Chairman?
The gentleman has 45 seconds remaining.
Mr. Chairman, I think that the body knows where we stand on the side of responsible environmental preservation, but at this point, in deference to the chairman of the full committee, I would yield what time remains to Mr. Rogers, because I see him standing, and I suspect he wants to be said on this.
Gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
I appreciate the gentleman's kindness. Mr. Chairman, I wanted to thank the gentleman from West Virginia for offering this amendment. This retroactive veto of the Spruce Mine is the poster child for EPA's regulatory overreach. But there are thousands more permits like this throughout Appalachia that the EPA could put on notice. But coal is not the only industry relying on these 404 permits. I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for 5 minutes.
The EPA's action at Spruce will have severe implications for agriculture, construction, transportation sectors because it sets a dangerous precedent that EPA can revoke any permit at any time for any reason or for no reason. Mr. Chairman, we need these jobs. and our job-creating industries need regulatory certainty, not more of the same regulatory roulette from the EPA. Mr. McKinley's amendment would inject some certainty into the regulatory environment by stripping the EPA of its authority to retroactively veto existing permits at their whim with no appeal. We in Congress need to keep our hand on the reins of this EPA, which is running roughshod over small businesses, family farms, even the constitutional authority of this Congress. And I want to thank again Mr. McKinley for offering this amendment, and I hope that we can have the support of all members of this body. Let me yield first to I'll be happy to yield to the gentleman from West Virginia.
I thank my colleague and distinguished chairman of the Appropriations Committee for yielding, and I rise in support of my colleague from West Virginia's amendment, Mr. McKinley. This particular action in regard to the spruce permit is an insult to the integrity of the mine permitting process. The particular mine in question is located in my congressional district. It was negotiated, the permit was negotiated with the EPA in good faith by the coal company over a space of 10 years. The permit was then granted 3 years ago and just recently was revoked by the EPA. It goes against the grain of what I think should be good faith efforts by coal companies to negotiate with the EPA, recognizing that they can't get all they want in a permit application, and therefore some withdrawal, some compromise is necessary. That was done in this particular case in a painstaking process over 10 years, and the permit was granted. And now to have it revoked is indeed an insult to the integrity of the mine permitting process. And I yield back to the distinguished chairman.
I thank the gentleman for his comments. Mr. Chairman, let us work. Give us the jobs. Give us the jobs. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. All time has expired. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from West Virginia. As many as are in favor will signify by saying aye. Those opposed will say no. No. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The gentleman from West Virginia. Recorded vote is requested pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18. Further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from West Virginia will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from West Virginia rise?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 217, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. McKinley of West Virginia.
Pursuant to the order of the House of February 18, 2011, the gentleman from West Virginia, Mr. McKinley, and a member opposed will each control 3 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from West Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I first want to thank my colleague and fellow committee member Cliff Stearns from Florida for offering a similar amendment. This amendment will specifically bar the use of funds to carry out the regulation of fossil fuel combustion waste under Subtitle C of the Solid Waste Disposal Act. In 2010, the EPA proposed this regulation, and here we are today standing against this emotional reaction triggered by a structurally unstable dam in Tennessee. What happened there is tragic and should be dealt with by the proper agency regarding the dam's integrity. It should not be used to advance an ideologically motivated agenda regarding the environment. Let me frame the issue. Fly ash is an unavoidable byproduct of electric power generation using coal. It is captured before being emitted into the atmosphere. The fine-grained dust-like particles are then recycled into concrete mixtures for our roads, our bridges, and buildings. It's an additive in masonry production of concrete blocks and bricks. It's been widely used in drywall panels used in houses, schools, and offices. The fly ash is even used in fertilizers in agriculture and soil amendments. If the EPA were allowed to continue with their plan to designate fly ash as a hazardous material, all of these time-tested energy-saving uses would come to a halt. The expense of handling the product would increase logarithmically, and so would our electric prices. By increasing the cost of power, it understandably causes the cost of power, the price of producing American-made products to increase and put America's businesses at another disadvantage against our foreign competition. that this EPA rule will be an unmitigated job killer. Coal ash has been studied, the coal ash use and disposal have been studied by the EPA for over 20 years. The Resource Conservation and Recovery Act directed the EPA to study the, quote, adverse effects on human health and the environment, if any, close quote, of current practices for disposal and utilization of fossil fuel combustion waste. The EPA's conclusion was that these wastes do not warrant regulation under Subtitle C. How many more reports need to be conducted by the EPA to show that fly ash is a non-hazard? Enough is enough. According to various environmental groups, for every ton of cement manufactured, about 6.5 million BTUs of energy are consumed, and about 1 ton of carbon dioxide is released. If we can replace that ton of cement with fly ash, we would save enough electricity to power the average home for 24 days and reduce the carbon dioxide emissions equal to a 2-month use of an automobile. What's ironic to me is that even the EPA's headquarters right down the street from us was built with a significant amount of fly ash mixed into the concrete matrix.
Time of the gentleman has expired.
Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia rise?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to claim time in opposition to the
Gentleman
amendment.
from Virginia is recognized for 3 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, the House is not in order.
The House is not in order. Chair asks members behind the individual that has time to take their conversations off the floor.
Thank you,
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment would stop EPA from identifying coal ash as hazardous waste and therefore prevent any regulation of that waste. The fact is that coal ash contains dangerous contaminants such as mercury, cadmium, and arsenic, and we know those can be dangerous. Without further guidance by EPA, this ash is stored on site at many large power plants where it leaches into the groundwater and into nearby streams. And EPA has found that communities across the country where coal ash has contaminated drinking water sources and surface water has affected people and wildlife. Through its public rulemaking process, it's been developing a rule. In fact, it has received more than 450,000 public comments. It's had web-based seminars. It's done everything to get opinion on both sides of this issue. It's currently conducting risk and economic analyses of the options available. Suspending work on a final regulation isn't going to satisfy anybody. For one thing, you're going to continue to have the coal ash at risk of contaminating drinking water. You're going to create uncertainty for power companies that burn coal, and you're going to eliminate potential markets for coal ash reuse, and they're not going to buy it if they think someday it may cause liability. The final EPA rule would eliminate that uncertainty, allow for coal ash to be properly stored and reused, and eliminate the risk to health and the environment. That's why the amendment should be defeated. I reserve the balance of my time. How much time do I have, Mr. Chairman?
The gentleman has 1.5 minutes remaining.
Well, at this point, I would yield the 1.5 minutes to the distinguished ranking member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Mr. Waxman.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment, and I want to tell you a story. On December 22, 2008, in Kingston, Tennessee, a coal ash impoundment structurally failed, and they released 5.4 million cubic yards of toxic sludge. This sludge blanketed the Emery River and 300 acres of surrounding land, creating a Superfund site that could cost up to $825 million to remediate. If this coal ash had been stored safely, this tragedy would never have happened. The wastes are dangerous. What EPA is trying to do is to make sure that the hazardous waste is disposed of safely to protect the health of communities. And I find it somewhat amazing to hear the author of this amendment saying that EPA is acting on an ideological agenda. How ideological do you have to be to act when you have an example of a terrible amount of coal ash poisoning areas and threatening drinking water. Is that ideological when they want to make sure that it's safeguarded and disposed of in a proper way? That's not ideological. That's the kind of thing we want EPA to do. So I would urge opposition to this amendment.
Gentleman's time has expired. All time has expired. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from West Virginia. As many as are in favor will signify by saying aye. Those opposed will say no. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Gentleman from West Virginia.
Ask for a recorded vote.
Gentleman from West Virginia requests a recorded vote pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18. Further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from West Virginia will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Kansas rise?
I have an amendment at the desk, number 545.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 545, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Pompeo of Kansas.
Pursuant to the order of the House of February 18, 2011, the gentleman from Kansas, Mr. Pompeo, and a member opposed will each control 10 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Kansas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield myself 2 minutes.
The gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
This amendment is actually pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. The Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act of 2008 called for the creation of a public consumer information database. And last year, the agency adopted a database rule that fails to uphold the statute. The statute required that the agency not allow materially inaccurate information to be on the publicly available database, and yet the rule as promulgated actually requires the agency to post materially inaccurate information. Indeed, it requires the agency to post that materially inaccurate information within 10 days. This will drive jobs overseas. It will increase the cost for manufacturers and consumers. The National Association of Manufacturers has announced its support for this amendment. The Home Appliance Manufacturers, the American Home Furnishing Association, the Consumer Specialty Product Associations all have recognized that this regulation is terribly onerous. The request of this amendment is very modest. It does not ask that this go away. It just asks for a delay in implementation. It asks for some time for the committee to review this regulation and come up with a regulation that makes sense and is consistent with the statute. So I would urge the support of this amendment. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to claim the time in opposition.
Gentleman from California is recognized.
I yield myself 2 minutes.
Recognized for 2 minutes.
This amendment would deny the Consumer Product Safety Commission the implementation of a searchable public consumer safety information database. Now, this database was part of a bill that passed this House by 424 to 1. We required a database, and CPSC is ready to release this database. It's based on similar successful databases run at the present time by the Food and Drug Administration and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. It would allow consumers to report harms associated with consumer products and then to research risks associated with these particular products. This is exactly what the American people want. They want information. They have a right to know. And in fact, every opinion poll indicates this. This amendment is a keep the consumers in the dark amendment. Parents want to know if a toy is dangerous. This amendment would take away their right to go to a database that would give them this information. Now, the claims against the database are pretty shocking. The manufacturers say, well, this is going to be a problem because they're going to put things on the database that are trade secrets or inaccurate. This is simply not the case. There is a safeguard. In fact, there are safeguards after safeguards to protect manufacturers. The statute provides more procedural safeguards. Agency. Anonymous complaints are not allowed. Only safety-related information will be included. Businesses get to see every report of harm before it is placed in the database. They have an opportunity to correct inaccurate information and to provide their own comments. I reserve the balance of my time. I would urge members to
Gentleman from
defeat this
California
amendment.
reserves his time. The gentleman from Kansas.
Mr. Chairman, I yield 1 minute to the chairwoman from Missouri.
Gentlelady from Missouri is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of this amendment. Having voted for the SIPSIA Act, I want to say that the intent of this database was to provide consumers with information on dangerous products. Some people have compared the database to the one operated by the National Highway and Traffic Safety Administration. However, the two are very different because NHTSA's database requires much more information about the actual product and is therefore much more reliable. From a government perspective, we should be concerned that there will be inaccurate information on a .gov website. And at the end of the day, the most important factor is this. If the database isn't accurate or reliable, it's going to be totally useless for consumers looking to avoid unreliable or dangerous products. It's already cost $29 million, and I say if you're going to set up a database, do it right. We as a Congress have a duty to fund things that are in the best interest of the American people, and the CPSC database is not. It should not go live next month with inaccurate information. I strongly support this amendment.
Time of the gentlelady has expired. Gentleman from California. Gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, I yield a minute and a half to the ranking member of the subcommittee that has jurisdiction over this issue, Mr. Butterfield.
Gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
I thank the gentleman. Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to this amendment. As part of the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act, the Consumer Product Safety Commission was charged with creating a publicly available, searchable database for complaints regarding consumer products. The amendment offered by the gentleman aims to bar the Commission from moving forward with this database. The Food and Drug Administration and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration both have publicly available databases for consumers to report harms or potential safety problems about cars and medical products. Those databases don't provide any due process to manufacturers to contest those claims. However, this database provides exhaustive due process, including allowing manufacturers to refute materially inaccurate claims and, if found to be inaccurate, have the complaint removed. The Commission database also allows manufacturers to issue a response and have those responses appear along with the consumer complaint. Mr. Chairman, I urge my colleagues to reject this amendment. I yield back.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from Kansas.
Mr. Chairman, I yield 15 seconds to my colleague, Mr. Barton.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 15 seconds.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to put in the record a letter dated November the 23rd, 2010 on this issue that I sent to the Chairman of the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, the Honorable Inez Tenenbaum, and I rise in strong support of the gentleman of Kansas's amendment. He is exactly right on this, and we should support him.
The request has to be made in general leave. Gentleman from California.
May I inquire of the Chair how much time each side has left?
Gentleman will state his parliamentary inquiry.
My parliamentary inquiry is I thought we had general leave on the bill to put things in the record.
In the committee of the whole.
Okay.
Yeah. The gentleman from California has 7 minutes remaining. And the gentleman from Kansas has 7 minutes and 45 seconds remaining.
Okay, I'm going to let you proceed.
Gentleman from
Mr. Chairman,
Kansas.
I'll reserve the balance of my time.
Okay. Then, Mr. Chairman, I want to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Massachusetts who authored this particular provision in the Consumer Product
From
Safety
Massachusetts, recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank you, and I thank the gentleman from California. This language is going to destroy the early warning system that has been put in place in order to give parents the information they need in order to protect their children. If this amendment passes, it will grant industry's wish to once again make the government its secret partner in crime by keeping reports of serious injury or even death hidden from public view. In 2000 and again in 2003, The Consumer Product Safety Commission documented cases of children suffering intestinal injuries after swallowing small but powerful magnets that had fallen out of toys. The public didn't know, and the CPSC did nothing. By mid-2005, after more reports of safety concerns associated with the magnets and 2 reports of serious, life-threatening injuries, the public still didn't know, and the CPSC still did nothing. On Thanksgiving Day, 2005, 22-month-old Kenny Sweet of Redmond, Washington, died after swallowing magnets that had fallen out of Magnitex toys. It was only after Kenny's death and an additional 4 hospitalizations that the CPSC finally gave the public an inkling of what was going on. But it actually took until April of 2007, after 7 years of reports of risks, numerous serious injuries, and a death before a full recall of all the products was undertaken. And that is not the only example of deaths and injuries that could have been avoided had parents known of the risks to their children. In all of these cases, we heard the same story. There simply aren't enough resources for the CPSC to quickly and fully investigate every complaint. In 2005, the CPSC investigated only 1%. This is a no vote. Otherwise, we are going to see the choking hazards of cribs that kill are once again hidden from public soul.
Time of the gentleman has expired. Gentleman from Kansas.